Ever wondered why it's easier to play video games or scroll through social media for hours, but studying for half an hour feels like a struggle? There's actually a scientific explanation behind this, and it's all about a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine, often dubbed as the pleasure molecule, is a key player in our brain that drives our motivation and desire to perform certain activities. It's like the fuel for our brain's reward system. When we engage in activities that our brain perceives as rewarding, like playing video games or scrolling through social media, it releases dopamine, making us feel good and motivating us to continue with the activity. But when we switch to tasks that our brain doesn't associate with immediate rewards, like studying or working out, the dopamine rush slows down, making the task feel less appealing. As we delve deeper into this topic, you'll see how dopamine, the pleasure molecule, plays a pivotal role in our motivation and desire to perform certain activities. What exactly is dopamine, and how does it influence our behavior? Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter, a chemical messenger that transmits signals in the brain and other areas of the body. It plays a significant role in how we perceive pleasure and reward, but it's not merely about the feel-good factor. Dopamine is best understood as the desire molecule. It's the anticipation, the chase, the yearning for a reward, not the reward itself. So, how does dopamine link to motivation? The answer lies in our brain's reward system. This system is a group of neural structures responsible for motivation, desire, and craving. When we anticipate a reward, our brain releases dopamine. This release creates a sensation of pleasure, which motivates us to repeat the behavior that led to the reward, reinforcing it as a habit. But let's delve a bit deeper. Imagine yourself in a maze, at the end of which lies a piece of cheese. Your brain recognizes the cheese as a reward and releases dopamine. This dopamine rush triggers a drive within you to navigate the maze and reach the cheese. The anticipation of savoring the cheese, guided by the dopamine surge, fuels your motivation to complete the task. And it's not just about tangible rewards like food or money. Dopamine also plays a role in our emotional responses. It can motivate us to pursue a romantic interest or strive for social recognition. It can even fuel our curiosity and drive us to seek out new knowledge or experiences. Interestingly, dopamine doesn't work in isolation. It collaborates with other neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and endorphins, to create a complex web of motivation and reward. For instance, while dopamine sparks our desire to pursue a reward, endorphins provide a sense of satisfaction and pleasure once we achieve it. It's also important to note that dopamine levels aren't constant. They fluctuate based on our experiences, emotions, and even our genetic makeup. For example, engaging in novel or challenging activities can boost dopamine release, enhancing our motivation and drive. On the flip side, chronic stress or negative emotions can dampen dopamine levels, leading to a lack of motivation or enthusiasm. But what if there's no dopamine release at all? Well, research has shown that without dopamine, animals, and presumably humans, lose the will to live. They won't eat, drink, or engage in any activities, even when food or water is readily available. This is because without dopamine, there's no desire or motivation to act. In essence, dopamine is the chemical architect of our desires. It's the biological spark that ignites our motivation, driving us to act and seek out rewards. It's what makes us yearn, strive, and push ourselves to achieve our goals, whether it's acing a test, winning a race, or simply enjoying a piece of cheese at the end of a maze. So dopamine essentially fuels our desire and motivation to engage in activities that promise a reward. Let's simplify the complex science of dopamine and motivation. Dopamine, a neurotransmitter in our brain, has a significant role in our motivation levels for different activities. It's like our brain's cheerleader, nudging us towards the tasks it perceives as rewarding. But how does it do this? It's all about the anticipation of rewards. Our brain releases dopamine when we're about to do something we think will bring us pleasure or satisfaction. And this dopamine release fuels our motivation to carry out the task. Think of it like this. Dopamine is our brain's carrot on a stick, keeping us moving towards what we believe will be a rewarding outcome. This dopamine-driven motivation isn't just limited to big, life-changing goals. It's at play in our everyday tasks, from the joy of biting into our favorite comfort food to the satisfaction of finishing a challenging level in a video game. But it's not all about pleasure. Dopamine also kicks in during tasks that we logically know are beneficial for us in the long run, like studying or working on a side business. Even though these tasks may not provide immediate gratification, the anticipation of future rewards can trigger a dopamine release, motivating us to push through. However, it's also important to note that our brains are quite savvy. If an activity doesn't have any immediate rewards attached to it, our brain may hold back on the dopamine, making it harder for us to find the motivation to do it. This is where the challenge lies in maintaining motivation for tasks that are good for us, but may not be immediately rewarding. So, while dopamine isn't the pleasure molecule it's often mistaken to be, it's certainly the desire molecule. It's what makes us desire things and gives us the motivation to pursue them. It's a powerful tool our brains use to prioritize our actions based on expected rewards. In essence, dopamine is the driving force behind our motivation to pursue activities that we perceive as rewarding. The power of dopamine was illustrated in a fascinating experiment with rats. This experiment, conducted by scientists who were curious about the role of dopamine in motivation, involved implanting electrodes into the brains of rats. When the rats pressed a lever, the electrodes stimulated the dopamine system in their brains. The result? The rats developed an insatiable craving. They would press the lever over and over again, forsaking food and sleep, simply to experience the dopamine rush. But that's not all. The scientists then reversed the process, blocking the release of dopamine in the rats' brains. And the results were equally startling. The rats, without dopamine, became so lethargic that they wouldn't even get up for a drink of water. They didn't eat, didn't mate, didn't crave anything at all. It was as if they had lost the will to live. However, if food was placed directly into their mouths, they would eat. They just didn't have the motivation to do it themselves. Now, this might sound extreme, but it's not so different from our own behavior. We, like the rats, are driven by dopamine. This neurotransmitter is what motivates us to get up and do things. If an activity releases a lot of dopamine, we're motivated to repeat it over and over again. This is why activities that bring immediate pleasure, like eating comfort food or playing video games, are so appealing to us. Our brains release dopamine in anticipation of the reward, creating a cycle of desire and gratification. But what happens when there's no immediate reward? Well, as the rats showed us, without dopamine, we lose motivation. This is why tasks that don't bring immediate gratification, like studying or working on a side project, can be so hard to stick to. Our brains aren't releasing as much dopamine, and so we struggle to stay motivated. This experiment demonstrates the immense influence of dopamine on our motivation and behavior. It's a powerful reminder that our brains are wired to seek out and repeat pleasurable experiences. And it's this drive for dopamine that can both motivate us and lead us astray. Scene script. Dopamine doesn't just affect rats, it shapes our daily lives too. Think about the last time you found yourself spending an hour scrolling through social media or playing a video game. You probably didn't plan to do it, but once you started, it was hard to stop, right? That's dopamine at work. This neurotransmitter, often dubbed as the pleasure molecule, is really more about desire and motivation than pleasure itself. It's the anticipation of a reward, not the actual reward, that dopamine is concerned with. Now let's take a step back and look at how this ties into our daily lives. Dopamine influences our decisions and priorities based on the anticipated release of dopamine. In other words, we're more likely to do things that we expect will make us feel good. This could be anything from eating a delicious meal to finishing a challenging puzzle to receiving likes on a social media post. These activities release dopamine, which in turn makes us want to repeat the behavior. But it's not all fun and games. Dopamine can also play a role in less desirable behaviors. Ever wonder why it's so hard to resist that extra slice of cake, or why some people struggle with substance abuse? Dopamine is part of the answer. These activities also trigger a release of dopamine, creating a powerful desire to repeat the experience, even when we know it's not in our best interest. This doesn't mean dopamine is our enemy. On the contrary, it's a crucial part of our survival. It's what motivates us to eat when we're hungry, drink when we're thirsty, and seek companionship when we're lonely. Without dopamine, we wouldn't have the drive to meet our basic needs. However, in today's world, where rewards are often just a click away, it's easy to overstimulate our dopamine system. This can lead to a cycle of seeking instant gratification and can make it harder to engage in activities that offer delayed but more meaningful rewards, like studying for an exam or working on a long-term project. So, what can we do about this? The key is to understand how dopamine works and to use this knowledge to our advantage. For example, we can create rewards for completing tasks that don't offer immediate gratification. This could be taking a short break after studying for an hour, or treating ourselves to a favorite activity after finishing a challenging task. In the end, it's all about balance. By understanding how dopamine influences our behaviors and motivations, we can make more conscious decisions and better manage our time and energy. Understanding the role of dopamine in our lives can help us better manage our motivations and behaviors. Dopamine, a pleasure molecule or a motivation manipulator? An intriguing question, isn't it? This neurotransmitter, with its dual nature, is a bit of a paradox. On one hand, it propels us towards activities that bring rewards, pleasure, and satisfaction. It's the force that drives us to study, work, exercise, and pursue our passions. It's that little nudge that says, hey, this is going to be worth it. But on the other hand, dopamine can be a crafty puppeteer, leading us down paths that may not be so beneficial. It doesn't distinguish between a healthy reward and a harmful one. It only cares about the anticipation of a reward. This is where the potential for addiction comes into play. The rush of dopamine that comes from certain substances or behaviors can be so intense that it overrides our logical understanding of the consequences. The result? A vicious cycle where we seek out these harmful rewards again and again just to experience that dopamine rush. Consider the case of drug addiction. Substances like cocaine and heroin trigger an unnatural surge of dopamine in the brain, creating an intense feeling of pleasure. The brain, in its quest for more dopamine, craves these substances, even though they're causing harm. It's a similar pattern with other addictive behaviors, like excessive gaming, binge eating, or compulsive use of social media. These activities provide an immediate dopamine hit, making them hard to resist, even when they start interfering with our lives. So, is dopamine our friend or foe? The answer isn't black and white. It's a critical part of our brain's reward system, driving us to achieve, learn, and grow. But it can also lead us astray if we're not mindful of its power. While dopamine can be a powerful motivator, it's crucial to understand its potential pitfalls. It's like a tool in our neurological toolbox. Used wisely, it can help us build incredible things. Used recklessly, it can cause damage. As with everything in life, the key lies in balance and understanding. So, how can we use our understanding of dopamine to our advantage? Well, let's start by acknowledging that dopamine is a powerful driving force behind our actions. It's the reason why we can spend hours engrossed in a video game or endlessly scrolling through social media. But it's also the reason why we find it difficult to focus on tasks that don't give us an immediate reward, like studying or working on a long-term project. So how can we leverage this knowledge to improve our productivity? Here are some tips. Firstly, break down large tasks into smaller, manageable parts. Each time you complete a part, you'll feel a sense of achievement. This success can trigger a release of dopamine, which will motivate you to move on to the next part. Secondly, incorporate rewards into your working process. These rewards don't have to be big. It could be a short break, a tasty snack, or a quick game on your phone. The anticipation of these rewards can stimulate a dopamine release, making the task at hand more appealing. Thirdly, maintain a healthy lifestyle. Regular exercise, a balanced diet, and adequate sleep can all help regulate your dopamine levels. This, in turn, can improve your focus, motivation, and overall productivity. Finally, practice mindfulness. Being aware of your actions and the effects they have on your dopamine levels can help you make more conscious decisions about how you spend your time. For instance, if you notice that you're spending too much time on activities that give you a dopamine high, but don't contribute to your long-term goals, you can choose to redirect your focus. Remember, dopamine is not the enemy. It's a part of our biology that's there to motivate us and drive us towards our goals. The key is to understand how it works and use it to our advantage. By understanding the role dopamine plays in motivation, we can potentially harness its power to enhance our productivity and achieve our goals.